to turn my mic on. Okay, right. So I'm going to just do a couple of little slides as an intro. So the session is getting started with Tabular Editor, or if you prefer to call it Intro to Tabular Editor, it's one and the same. It's me, Mary Fealty. It's my company, Broadtree Solutions. I'm pretty active on Twitter. Well, I'm on Twitter. I'm always there, always checking out what's happening, and that's me on LinkedIn if you're interested. But more importantly, I'm keen to just get on to the actual stuff itself. So the background on why I'm covering Tabular Editor, especially when I'm not like a hardcore Power BI developer or anything close to that, but there's a few reasons why I'm covering it. The number one is it's a fantastic tool. It absolutely rocks. Like, it really is class. It can save you an awful lot of time and maybe some heartache as well, I believe. But the reality is, why I put this session together was that I did not find it easy to get started. I really found it hard to get to grips with it. So I sort of thought, right, if I'm finding it hard, maybe I can help somebody else, make it a little bit easier for somebody else to get started. So why I then sort of put this session together. The other thing is then what the session is not. How to install guide, because it is a separate piece of software, so it's nothing to do with that. And the software itself, some of the key components that I'm going to cover in this session and spend quite a bit of time on, is using a language called C#. I don't even know sometimes. In a previous session I was calling it C+ for ages, thinking that's what that, anyway, it's C#, and I don't necessarily understand C#, but yet I've still been able to make this tool work for me. The other thing as well, I think it's pretty obvious by now that it is not a deep dive. What I want you to think about is it's more a dipping your toe in. Now, a little bit more about Tabular Editor. As I say, it's a separate tool that is used within the Power BI environment. But what's important to understand is that there's two parts to it, or two flavours of it, I should say. There's not two parts, there's two flavours. There is Tabular Editor 2, which I'm just referring to as TE2, and that one is open source and totally free. So Tabular Editor 3, which is a commercial offering at a cost that's very, it's totally, for what you get, it's fantastically cheap at 85 quid. We'll say it's in euros, but it's probably the same. That costs you that for a year. It gives you a hell of a lot more capabilities. It's a much more powerful tool when you're using the Tabular Editor 3 version. But I'm going to focus on this session on the free version, just so that it allows you to go off and explore in your own right if you wish to. There's a link there to a lot more information of what differences there are between the two products and the two offerings. But as I say, I'm going to use Tabular Editor 2. Okay. We'll be shortly moving into the actual sort of demo time, but before I do that, I want to do a little bit of an orientation of Tabular Editor 2. Right now, it is 2 because they do look different, but if we focus on it, and this is essentially what it looks like whenever you see it on the screen. What we have is these different components. I'm not somebody that's coming, but I wasn't coming to this with any prior sort of coding tools. It's not, wasn't using Visual Studio. For those of you who might be using that things, maybe some of this stuff is much more apparent, but to me it was a little bit like, what is this? So I thought it do no harm to just spend a little bit of time about talking about what's in there, just touching on some of it. What we have is over on this left hand side is really just a replica of the Power BI model and what it looks like. We then have down in the bottom right an area called the properties pane, which depending on where you are in the Power BI model or looking at different things, it will give you more information about all the different elements of that thing, all the different properties essentially. We then have up here at the top, we have a little tab, and that tab is the place where you do all your C+ scripting. And then we have a second tab, which is called the expression editor. And that is where you place DAX scripts. And you will see both in play through this session. The bulk of it will be in the C+ area, but I just want you to know that there's these two different tabs. Be mindful of them, they do exist. We also have a filter pane here, which is not really any, it's the same sort of filter pane as search in your Power BI model, where if you want to look for something in the models specific, this is quite a simple model, but if it was complex, it might be easier to use search, the filter pane, and essentially search for what you're looking for. We then have the save. It's just a little save icon, and I'm just calling that out because it's really important. And it was, you just, again, need to be aware of where that is. And I think this is really one of the final things I'm touching on. And there's a little icon here, which is just this little, there's a lot of these icons. I'm not going into them. Some of them I don't even know what to do. But this last one I find quite useful. And I'll show you what I mean, I hope, if I remember whenever I go through this process. And that is just allows you to see a more simplified version of your model. And as I say, if I remember, I trust myself to remember, then I'll show you what I mean by that. So now it is time to dip the toe in. So I'm going to stop the stop the slides, and here we are in Power BI. And we've just got this really simple model. Okay, I'll just go down and have a wee look at it from the relationships view. Fairly simple model. We've got one fact table and then some dimensions, you know, dates, policy, transaction types, so on. That part of it is almost not relevant. It's just a very straightforward, simple model. There's not an awful lot going on there. But let's start thinking about how we can use Tabular Editor to speed up the process of working with a model and what sort of things that you can do with it. So number one, it has to be installed in your system, but I'm not going through the whole install part. And then you access it through the new and external tools area. And you'll see that we've got here at the end on my external tools, we've got two choices. We've got the Tabular Editor 3 one that I mentioned, that's the commercial version. And then we've got Tabular Editor, the free version. So as I say, I'm going to focus on Tabular Editor, the free version. And we have this model, it's called Getting Started, and we have all this information here, and we'll just get that kicked off. So I just need to click on it, and here we have, essentially, if we look over here at the fields and think about it, we've got what? We've got a dates table, policy, transactions, types and transactions. And here we have it again, just a complete replica of what is in the model. And here we're getting the evidence that we're connected, and we have this connection through to that table. I talked about just so I can touch on this because it is useful to know this little thing that I'd referred to. If you look at the model as it exists, it's a really simplified version of it, or at least it's a version of the model as I appreciate it. But there's more things going on. And if I'll show you what that looks like when I click on this. This is actually taking it into the other elements of the model that I don't know about. Look, if you can see, there's data sources, there's relationships, roles, shared expressions, tables, all sorts of things. All I really care about is the model and the tables within that model. You, over time, may be much more interested in lots of other things, but all you'll see in this session is the use of the model and the tables. So I'm just going to toggle that back to where I was. So now we're just looking at the tables within the model. I'd mentioned about the properties pane, which is down here. And There's nothing showing there because I haven't anything selected, but if I select my dates table, you'll start to get lots of information that tells you about the dates table and the policy and the model, and really anything is, once there's something active, you'll get more information about it here. And it is useful to become aware of it. You can do things here, but we're going to focus more on the scripting side. Just want to set up a few things while I'm here. Let me just want to make sure. Go here. Just bump things up. So I talked about the filter pane. Here we go. If I wanted to find fees, for example, which I happen to know is within the model, I can just choose fees. And just like it would have done in the search, it's going to restrict things down to anything that's contained in the search area. So that's the filter pane. And the all-important save button that you need to know about just when you want to save things back. But the focus of quite a few of these things that we'll cover is in this area here, advanced scripting. And we're going to start, the whole session itself is about just going through a process of scripts and just taking a little bit of time just to look at them and then run those scripts and just see what they do to the actual model itself. So first off, here's my scripts. I'll pop them over here so you're not too distracted by them. And I'm going to start life with a really, really simple one. Right. In our table, transactions, we have a number of columns in the table that really need to be hidden. So, you know, we're talking about right-click hide, so on and so on. But I'm going to do is just to use Tabular Editor to just demonstrate that you can do that here. You can see the date created is already shown as hidden because it's now turned grey, light grey. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to select the columns that I don't need to see because they're really there for the purpose of relationships against the other tables. So these are the remaining ones that need to be hidden. Now that I've done that, let's look at the actual script that is going to be run when I'm going to hit this, one of the ones that I didn't highlight. I'm going to hit this run button in a moment, and it's going to take the action of hiding these columns. But let's just look at the script itself, right? What it's saying is for each of the selected columns, right, which is now, instead of select columns, it's now just called C. So we're just creating this variable called C, which really is just saying, look, the C is the selected columns. The selected columns are the one on the left in blue. Change the property is hidden to true. And at the minute, let me just move this up. What we're going to do is, just in one file swoop, we're going to change the property. I could change it here, by the way, I could just as easily change it here, but that's not a script, so that's not me doing a very good demonstration of the scripting value. So I'm just going to hit run, and you will see that they are now hidden. You know they're hidden because they're grey, but they're still showing over in the Power BI model. They're still showing there, and the reason they're still showing there is because I haven't saved it yet. So I'm now going to hit save. And now they're hidden and gone. So that was the first one. As I say, I could have just changed it on the, you'll see now there's the status in the properties, which is now set to the true, which is essentially what we just told it to do. So that's the first script. Now let's have a look at another valuable script. And we shall go for, I'm just going to replace what's in here. I'm just going to get that, clear that off, replace that with the new one. And we have, what I want to do on this, using this script, we've got the same thing for the select columns, which has now become a variable called C. We're going to create, these are the columns, saying, of these columns here, what I want you to do is create a new measure. And that new measure, I want you to give it, I wanted you to call it whatever the name of the column is in the first place. So commission fees, GWP paid, right? Whatever that is. I want you to prefix it with the word total and then allow a little space. That's going to be the name of the measure. And then the expression for the measure is the word sum, open brackets. And that's just, that's just in quotation marks. And then here is the actual the DAX object full name. Here's the C. This is the C part of the, sorry, here's the C here where we've got the selected columns. And then we've got C, and the full object name is the transactions, which is the table name and the column name, so the square brackets, that's what the DAX object full name stands for. So it's the transactions, open brackets, commission, close brackets, and then finish it off by putting the final brackets on at the end. And then while you're at it, format the string to 0 decimal places and hide the original column. So that's what's going to happen in this script, okay, whenever I run it against those 4 measures. So I just hit run. And here we have, if we go to the expression editor, you'll see the name, there's the total, the name's been the name of the column, and then the expression, which is sum transactions commission, sum transaction fees, sum, and so on. So that's done the job. Again, there's no sign of it over in Power BI because I haven't hit save. And I know I'm doing it as a real dummy's guide, but these were things that caught me out. Don't ask me why, but they caught me out at times of going, why is that not showing up? And then you go, because you haven't saved it, you twit. So there you go. So now we have our table, which is just moved to the top because there's no longer any visible columns. So it's just pushed itself up in priority to the top of the actual model itself in Power BI. But we now have those fields available to use. And let me just pop a couple of them in. We'll just pop in total commission. That'll do lovely. And there you'll see we've got it. Yeah, in part of the formatting, we've got the 1000 separator, we've got 0 decimal places, and just that one script did three different things just in a heartbeat. And would have been that quick, whether it was against 4, 20, 30, 40, whatever you happen to have in your system. And you can just do it as fast as that. Now, the other thing then, say, for example, I happen to think this is quite a good little thing to have to hand, where you may just want to, that every time you're working on a new model, that you're going to create a number of straightforward, very simple sum calculations. And what we can do then is have that, instead of that living life in the wee text, I've just got this in the notepad, you can actually save that for use to be used elsewhere, or not elsewhere, at the next time around. And there's a little green plus symbol. So if you just choose plus, you can actually save that. So just have that added to both the model and measure. I'm not quite totally certain about where it is, but I know that certainly for the model and the measure, that works perfectly fine. We say OK. And what that actually means is, let me just clear that out. So instead of that living off on a script somewhere where I might not be able to find it or whatever, I can go to this area, which is samples. I can go there, little drop down. I can go to custom actions, and I can just call back that measure at any time. And that's available to you for any scripts that you might use, that you can just have them as part of your toolkit in Tabular Editor. And I just amazing. Okay, now we're going to look at the next set measures. Here we go. So this time, and these are all pretty straightforward measures that you might want to use. So then we're going to, in this example, we're going to create new measures on the back of our new 4 measures. So now that we've got those 4 measures, we can create some time intelligent measures, for example. So we're now going to use another for each. And the scripting part of it it's not mega important that you understand it to use Tabular Editor, but it's just giving you a little bit of insight to what's going on as a concept. But what we're now going to say here is for each, and this variable called M, which could be called W, but it's just M, and this is in selected measures, whereas the previous time it was selected columns. We're going to say for the ones that we've selected, which I've now done, so we've got the blues over here. So we've got the 4 measures that we have. What we want to then do is for each of them, I want to define the date. Then we're going to say, look, because these are going to be time intelligence measures, I'm just up here variable, just letting it know what I call my date table, because everybody could be different. You could, could be dates, it could be calendar. I happen to use at dates. Yours might just be date. Your date might be a date key, whatever. It could be anything different. But you could just sort of specify it up here, and then the code itself is going to use whatever it happens to be specified up at the very top. And then, as I say, we're going to select these 4. And we're going to say for each of these 4 measures, I want you to add a total year-to-date measure. And I want you to call it whatever the name of the measure is. So if you think about total commission being the first one, add to the end of it year to date, but with a space. Right, so that's going to be the name of the measure. And then here we go once again with the actual expression. And the expression of a total year to date is, we're saying, look, this is what it is. This is the beginning of it with the open brackets. Here we're saying the DAX object name, which is the total commission, square brackets, total commission. That's what it's going to reference. And then the date column, which is up at the top on the variable that we set for the date, which in this case is at dates date, is the date column in question. And that will actually add, it. And we want to again do a format string to thousand separator, blah, blah, blah. The next one then is the expression for prior year. So I'm sure you can recognize that without me going into too much detail, but it's the formula once again, but then we're actually referencing the objects. The next one then is the variance between current year, prior year. And then the final one I want to do on this one is just the actual percentage variance. And that last one, from a format string perspective, is set to different places. And let's now run that one. Boom. And now we're up to, I don't know, 20 odd measures just in a heartbeat. And we can give that a save. If there had been errors, which I haven't chosen to show errors, I must say, if there was an error, it would, which I haven't created one, so I can't really demonstrate it to you. You will get a little triangle, just warning you that that measure is not being, it hasn't worked. But I, as I say, I've no written proven example of that. So let me just go in here and start putting some of this information in. So we've got total commission prior year. What is the variance between the two? And then the percentage variance. All without me having to write umpteen measures. And here's the thing, when you have to write loads and loads and loads of measures, I think my fear, and where I get the big comfort I get from Tabular Editor, is the fear of not paying attention when you're creating one of those measures and actually being incorrect. And I think one of the beautiful things about Tabular Editor is it allows you just to make sure that your code itself is correct, and you can test that. And once you've done that and you know that it works, then you can just save that to be used. And we've got pop it away, and that's it. You never have to think about it again. And the next time you're going to build a new model, you just call on that and it creates the measures that you want it to create. So that's that example. Next, so by the way, these examples that I've shown you are all, these examples are just ones that I got, scripts that I got from online. So I didn't have anything to do with writing them. I might have enhanced them a little bit around, you know, the format strings and stuff like that. I might have done a little bit more on that as I started to gain a little bit of knowledge. But I didn't write them to start with. I still didn't find it that easy to get started, even when I wasn't writing the measures. But I kind of could see how valuable it was, and I thought, you can't give up. You've got to keep going with it. And now that I've got more comfortable, I'm kind of almost struggling to understand why I find it challenging. But what I can say is I did. So that's the kind of takeaway. It is easy once you've got it, and the stuff only, well, this stuff's easy. There's more, but I should say this stuff's easy. Oh, this example now. Let me make sure. Yeah, I've got that. Right. I'm going to go back to PowerPoint for a moment to look at this example, because this was me trying to write my own measure for the first time. And as I say, a little bit like when I look back on it and go, why was it so hard? I don't know, but it was, because now it sort of makes sense to me. But what I wanted to do was just go, right, how's the best way to think about the measure? And this is a measure that has a variable. And what I wanted was, one of the things that's a big important measure to me is the percentage of. So that whatever metric we're looking at, I always want to know what is that as a percentage of whatever else we're looking at. And here's an example of what that looks like. I'm sure you're too. So that's what I'm happen to call it. And then I create a variable that is called calc. Oh, don't want you to go ahead. Apologies. Right. I call it calc, and what's actually happening here is I want to calculate this particular measure, which in this case is total GWP. I want to factor in all the data from the transactions table, and then from that calc, I want to divide the total GWP into the calc. Okay, that's ultimately the actual measure itself. But now let's have a look at it coded. So first off, these are the total GWP and transactions are the kind of the objects that are part of it. And if we look at it, I'm creating a variable on the transaction table, which I'm calling T. Okay, don't actually have to do that, but I've probably copied some element from somebody else. And then We've got this next one, which is the selected measures that I want to create this calculation against. We're doing an example of total GWP, but there's at least 3 measures in there I want this percentage for: the commission, the fees, and the GWP. So I'm going to select those 3. They become my selected measures. And then I want to add the table. I want to add a new measure. I want to give it the name, in this case, total GWP, and then I want to add all percentage, allowing for the space just to the end of it. That's going to be the name of my measure. And then the next bit is then, just as it had been before, is the literal parts, right? So these are the literal parts. We're saying, right, I want you to put in the expression is going to read var calc equals calculate close or open brackets. That's just the text of that. Then we bring into play the object name, which is the total GWP, and that's it there. And then we've got for all of the table, which is that variable here, which is the table transactions. And then we just simply want to divide that object name, which is in this case total GWP, into calc. And then everything else in between is just making up, you know, how do you make that actually work? You know, what are the things that make that expression work? And it's just the literal parts that you need to put in. So that's the broken down part of it. And we'll come back, and here it is. So here's it in reality. We've got, you know, the literal part of it, then the object, and they're just defined. You'll see there's pluses just to confirm that they're being included. And then we're back to what else do we want to literally say? Plus in the objects, and so on until we get to the end. And then while you're at it, when you're finished, format it to percentage to 1 decimal place. So let me choose the measures, mission. Right, and I'm not going to select it, and I'll just run that. And here we are. So it's actually added 2, hasn't it? Oh, no, I missed one. Apologies, there should have been. Let me just undo that. Undo. Edit. Undo. Try over here. Right. Okay, so did you note? Well, I probably wasn't easy to notice. My undos, right? They weren't working. I'm over here. I've got the focus on the advanced scripting, and I'm busy going to edit, undo, and it wasn't removing the measure. And because I want to add something to it. And the reason that was happening was I was over here. What I did then was move over. I think if I do redo, can you see they've just returned again, these unsaved scripts? And if I go back over here and I try undo, it's not moving them, but it is taking the script away because it's acting on that side. It's acting on the scripting part. I need to put the focus over to the actual model view to be able to undo the script. And that's it. Right, so that's great because I didn't select all of the script I wanted to select. And if I go, here we go. I pop these in and I choose my measures that I want to run this script against, and I now choose run. And that's it. So what it was there's not just one measure that I like to put in. I like the percentage all, but I also want all selected, and there's a subtle difference between the two. And I didn't want to run just one and then a separate one together. I wanted to run them both. So now we have these 2 extras, so I can give that a quick save. And I also have the choice to then say, you know, add all selected or whatever I want, and I can have that saved so that I can call on it, not relying on a script to copy and paste from. Okay, now we're going to move away from the C+ area just for a minute or two. And we're going to go over to the expression editor. And the reason we're doing that is because we are going to introduce a thing called calculation groups. And what I'm going to give you an example of calculation groups and how I've used it. And let me just bring you into the relationship view. And what I want to use it for is to be able to, on my dates table, maybe it's easier to look at it from here. On my dates table, I have 3 relationships between my fact and the dates table. And the active one is this field called date created. But I also have inactive relationships between date raised and date settled. And it's because in this particular data set, either one of those could be valuable to the user at any moment in time. And I want to show you how I can use calculation groups to allow that to be put into place. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what calculation groups are. What I hope I do is inspire you into understanding, right, well, even if you're not deeply understanding, that you go, gosh, these things are incredible, because they are incredible. I'm just going to simply show you an example of what a calculation group looks like and a value that it has for me. So first off, I need to start this process of creating a calculation group. And the only place I can do it from is this starting point of the thing, which is the model itself. So when I click on, as soon as I do right click on the model, I can create new calculation group. Might be difficult to see, but there it is, the third option down. If I do it from anywhere else, you're not going to see, you're not going to see this option to create a calculation group. It has to be done from the model level. So we're going to say, create new calculation group. And here we go, we've got it ready. And we're going to call it which date. So we now have the beginning of a calculation group, which now it's now moved to the bottom because it's just in terms of its alphabetical order. Just open this up and I'm going to call it, just going to give that name. I'm just going to also call it which name, it. And you'll notice I'm doing it in the properties pane because it seems to be easier to get it to change from there. And you'll see that's now called which date. So these are just naming parts. What's important is this bit here, calculation items. There's going to be 3 calculation items. Looking at whatever we're looking at by the active date relationship, which is date created, but we're also on to have the same calculations calculated but using the 2 inactive relationships. So let's just start that process. We're going to add a new calculated item and I'm just going to call that created. And well, I would have liked to call it created, so I'll just go down to the properties pane, call it created, and I'll add another one, and I'll add the third one in as well while I'm there, and we'll call this last one settled, and then this middle one we'll call effective. These are the 3 groups. Okay. Again, there's no great explanation about what's going on, other than to say that when it's created, which is the basis of it's the active relationship. So I want it then to use the selected measure. So whatever that measure is, because it's automatically by default going to work to create, the measure is always going to be based against the created because that's the active relationship. And that's the most important thing to just be conscious of. And then on the second one, which is the effective. I'm going to choose it. And here in the expression editor, remember this is DAX, this is not C+. I'm now going to say, this time I want you to shift it to this other relationship, which is on this inactive relationship, date raised. So when you're using that one, I want it to be against that date table. And then when you're using the last one, we'll go to date settled. Sorry if it's a bit difficult to see. Let me just zoom in on this so you can see that maybe a bit more clearly. So we're saying calculate the selected measure, whatever that happens to be. But when you're doing it, use this inactive relationship against the date table. Okay, now that's not what calculated tables aren't about using. Calculated tables are about any number of different ways of doing calculations. This is just an example of how I use it. Right, so now I have my three. Can you see them now? We've got these three items that are now in the model, but there's no sign of them as yet in Power BI because I haven't chosen to save. We're going to choose save, and then hopefully you'll see more clearly what this does. So we've now got it saved. As it's a calculation group, at this minute in time, you now have to choose refresh now. There is signs of it here, but I still do have to choose refresh now for it to complete. And look, it actually gives, I'm only really seeing it here, one or more calculation groups need to be manually refreshed. So we'll do that. Refresh now. And what I want to do is, let me just take a bit of this slicer, pop it up there. And don't need you, actually, you're nothing to do with it. And now we're going to get rid of that and I'm going to replace it with which date. And you'll see that we now have choices. And I think on this choice, I am going to make it a single. I don't think I am. I know I am. I'm going to make it a single select because it's, we're never looking at something across multiple dates. But if there is nothing selected, it's going to use the active relationship, which means by default, that is the date created. But here we are, we're looking at the same table where it's doing all the measures. There's 4 measures in here, and it's working using the created date. As soon as I choose effective, it's now working against the effective date. So if you notice on created, the value for commission is 1,084,000. If we go to effective, 1,091,000. So it happens so bloody fast, you can barely notice it. And then we've got settled, which then will return a different figure again. So just by being able to create those calculation groups, spend a little bit of time, I now have the ability to look at the information, and my customers now can look at it whatever date method they choose. And that was phenomenal for me. That made such a difference. I did have that available in the past, but the workings for that was kind of crazy. I could have had all these different calculations, which I didn't do. I just had all these different ways that the data could have been sliced. So I had the size of my data set was 3 times as big as it would have been or is by using calculation groups. So hopefully that was interesting for you. I found that one really blew my mind. Now, that's a quick one on calculation groups. Now we're just going to finish off with a couple of other little options. So we're back to advanced scripting. I'm going to clear that off. And at the minute, all the measures in this table are all pretty raw. They're not formatted. Using at the minute when I'm creating these my measures myself, I just hasn't figured out a way to format them properly. So they're all pretty raw. They're not formatted in the traditional sense of as the Italians would like things to be formatted. So let's just select all our measures, which I can do quite easily. Just Shift Control, select them all. I don't even have to do that. What am I doing? When I look at the code, look at me. I understand the code really well. Right, I don't have to select anything because I'm actually saying, look at the model, and in that model, consider every measure that exists in that model and format the DAX. Okay, so let me run that and we'll focus on, let's have a focus. When we look at it, we'll go back and have a look at how this one reads after I've changed it, because it's the one that's going to take the most, you'll see the most contrast on. So let's now run the script. You won't see anything because it, well, actually I lie. If you look down at the bottom corner, it actually shows that there's 22 measures in the model and 22 have been changed. So if we now go back to the script, as you can see, we now have formatted DAX, which I think is pretty cool. And the final thing, obviously, in this is save. And now the model itself has all the nicely formatted DAX in there. Okay, so that one was nice. And here is the final little script that I'm going to run. And this one is, once again, we're going to say, I don't know, for all the measures in the model, what I want you to do is add a description. So the description is, you would see a description in more detail here. You know, if I wanted to say something about a measure, I could say lots of stuff here in the description. So that's what it's focusing on. And when that has a description, let's just leave it there and I'll say hiya. For anybody who's totally familiar with this, that's great, but I hover over. Can you see the description says hiya just there on total commission? But if I run this one, what I can have in the description is it to basically let me know, as when I hover over, what the expression of that measure is. So let me run that, and I don't have to select anything because I've said, look, for every measure in the model, do this. And now if I go back to total commission and I hover, it's still got hiya, because that might have been because I messed it. Oh, here, I probably didn't save. Right, I didn't save. So let me try that and save. And here we go. The description now confirms to me what the actual measure is. If I go down to all selected, we get that. And the nice thing about this, in my mind, is when you publish that to the service and you're working on, you know, you're maybe doing some editing in the service, normally you haven't a clue what the measure, you know, what has created that measure, what is that calculation. And that is a really good way just to be able to hover over and actually see the expression that has created that measure. You don't see it, the user doesn't see it, it's only in editing mode where that becomes apparent. So here we are. That was all the scripts that I wanted to go through with you. Okay. First off, I don't know why this is the second time in a row where I still have not yet put up thank you at the end for taking time to listen to me talk about Tabular Editor, but thank you very much for that. And here we are, we've got useful links. So you've got the QR code, or you've got the bit.ly link to the folder that has all the scripts that I worked through. They're available in there, the Power BI file as it began life, not how it finished life, but as it began life. And these PowerPoint slides are in there, as long as, yeah, so the whole thing's in there and available. You're more than welcome to go to that and use it as you see fit. And in addition to that, probably for those who really were able to just go, yeah, this is great, and I can make this work, and you're keen and interested to really explore more, here are links to any number of different resources on Tabular Editor. The calculation groups are mega. This guy, Bernat, is the master of calculation groups. This particular one here, the Power BI Ultimate Guide to Dynamic Measures, is incredible. It's Johnny Winter. I don't know if you know him, but Johnny Winter, he's created this incredible script to do dynamic measures. I think it's so worth investing some time on that, because it will blow your mind what you can do with it, and a number of other ones, including the guy himself who created this tool. I don't know how he did it, but he did. He's got a 4-part series that takes you from the sort of stuff I was showing you there, which is in part 1, but all the way through to how you can use it in DevOps and all the sort of the high level enterprise stuff, where I know that there's a lot of businesses out there relying heavily on Tabular Editor to allow them just to be a hell of a lot more efficient than they would have been without it. So there we go. Thank you very much. And that takes me to the end of the session.
Fantastic, Mary. Thank you very much for that. There is, I was going to say, there's no questions in the chat.
That's grand.
And I was a little bit worried that the chat may not have been available for anyone and they didn't pipe up and tell us, but I can see there is messages coming through of thanks, great session and everything. So that's a positive sign.
I like that. That's I'm more happy with that than any questions, because I'm hoping it was some, you know, the core elements of what I was going through is just, you know, it honestly is easy once you get to grips with it.
Yeah. Like we were saying at the very start, you know, for somebody who hasn't seen it, doesn't understand it, then it's going to be, you know, a lot to take in. But if you understand the concepts and see that there's a better, easier way of doing things, then it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, messages coming in saying it's been very, very useful. So it's
excellent.
I was going to say, any session I've ever done, as long as there's one person gets something out of it, then I know the job's been done.
Yeah. And as I say, the slides are there for anybody who wants them.
There's some really good scripts in there, Mary. I must admit, I've seen a lot of them, but there was a few in there which I'm going to take away and use myself now.
Good. What was the one? What was the ones that you sort of thought, oh, I like that?
Well, I'll tell you which one I use regular, and it's a lifesaver. Is the one where you add the expression to the description field. So
isn't that great?
Oh, honestly, it saved my life so many times in the service when you deploy into the service and you, what's this measure again?
Yeah.
You just hover over and it's just there. It's awesome.
The simplisticness of actually running it. We're just going, this is bonkers.
Yeah.
That guy, what he came up with, and it just blows my mind that this came out of somebody going, he needed it, didn't he? I mean, it was out of sheer convenience. He understood C#. He understood the whole TOM concept. Like, I don't know how his brain does that, but it did it. It was really okay with that. And then he went, oh, well, I could do this. And then he created that tool. It's
awesome,
like, wow.
Yeah, I like what you said about the formatting. The Italians are like it a lot better that way.
I know. To be honest with you, they're under. I mean, I couldn't give one fiddler's one as long as I can read it. And I'm not somebody who's into big novel formulas, you know, by any stretch.
We're all guilty of not formatting our DAX or even our SQL scripts as well, you know.
Oh, SQL, you see, No. SQL, I can't go without, and I don't format it. I write it reasonably formatted and then go off to an online tool and then get it formatted. to format it for me.
Redgate.
Yeah,
Lifesaver again. Yeah.
No, I'm too cheap for Redgate.
Is it poorsequel.com?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a free one online.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I honestly dabble in SQL, but I have to format it. The expression that one I just think is bonkers brilliant. It's my everything. But even just, some of the stuff I don't even show, where you like, there's things that you realize, I don't know, there's just, I go to it so many times for so many different things, Tabular Editor, not necessarily scripts, but even just to move things around.
Yeah.
It's just such a go-to tool.
Even the time intelligence. I mean, I wrote some time intelligence functions DAX scripts a long time ago, and it just took me so long to do each one individually. And when you've got a script that just does it on like that. Yeah. And you know what I mean about, like, you get that comfort of knowing as you're doing it by a script, it's right. Yeah.
Because you've tested it. You've got to just test the life out of one thing, and then you never have to worry about that again. It's just that fear of, if you're just doing repetitive scripts or repetitive measures, can you be sure you were paying attention all of the time?
Yeah.
But
have you used Tabular Editor 3 much?
I haven't. No, it takes too long to load compared to Tabular Editor 2. And I personally don't. There's nothing I do that gets that I'm going to get I'll keep on supporting it, because I just think what he's done, would be happy to pay for Tabular Editor 2. So I'll keep on supporting 3, but I'm pretty much stuck on 2.
As a free tool, it's so powerful anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but I did notice in the chat, it looks like, so that was good. It looked like people hadn't seen just what it's capable of. So that's awesome. And that's sort of, I'm thinking, right, if I can help somebody and acknowledge that it's not dead simple, because I really, even for anybody who thinks it is, it really isn't for everybody.
So even poor Richard there saying he's going to have to redo all his models now.
Just for the fun.
Yeah.
Because you can.
Same here.
Keep them busy.
Yeah.
So for everyone else that's still online, last chance, if you want to either come off mute and ask a question, feel free to put your camera on, or drop something into the chat if you are a little bit camera shy. Because I see we will be looking to wrap up in the next 30 seconds or so. If not, let everyone go away, have the tea, have a pint, whatever it might be.
Whatever you fancy.
Yeah. Glenn's probably on to his 4th one already.
You have a disco to go back to, don't you?
That's why he's had 4 pints.
Mini disco downstairs. Actually, they've gone out, thankfully.
Oh dear. Right. Well, it was an absolute pleasure, guys.
Oh, hang on, Mary. I don't know if Jeff, you got your hand up there.
I have. I just wanted to say thank you very much for delivering that presentation. It was excellent, very useful, gave me quite a few things to think about. I don't do a huge amount of Power BI, but analysis services tabular models, been having to get into that recently, and so I've had to dabble in the Tabular Editor and also a bit of reverse engineering of Power BI reports, that kind of stuff into Tabular, and some of the stuff you showed me there is something I can definitely use in the future. So yeah, thank you very much for that. It was a great presentation, and thank you for coming. And also, whilst I'm on, nice to see you, Chris and Glenn. It's been a long time, but maybe again sometime in the future. And I do have a camera, but it's not working, so.
I thought you were going to see you naked or something there.
Well, you never know. I could be in the bath, couldn't I?
That's the beauty of virtual events. Yeah.
So thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Great hearing your voice again, Jeff. And fingers crossed we'll be meeting up at some point this year. Have have a couple of beers. Glenn said he's going to buy this time. He never normally does.
Fingers crossed.
Always do.
Cheers, guys, folks.
Awesome.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Cheers, Jeff.
All right. Thanks.
Right.
Mike.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'll stop the
Okay.
recording now. Mary, thank you very, very much for giving up your time to present your session. We really, really do appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
And just once more for everyone else, we will be back next month. Glenn, remind me of the date. I've forgotten it already. The 11th. 11th of May.
11th, sorry, yes.
Wednesday, the 11th of May. So get yourself registered for that one, and we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.